I want to welcome you here to the Meyer Theater. We have a symbiotic relationship with the Grand Rapids Public Museum that we are very welcoming of and have enjoyed that. Because in the past, years ago, we used to hold our public meetings down at Schuler Books on 28th Street. But since, COVID changed, or was a pivot point for a lot of changes, and one of them was for us to find a venue where we could have our public meetings. And so the Public Museum has been very gracious to us in offering us this workspace. But I will give credit to Schuler Books. We were at dinner, we were talking about our stories and how we came into the Astronomical Association. And for myself, it was, again, about back in the late 2000s there. I came to a presentation done by our very own Jim Farish down here in front when he was doing a presentation on aids for astronomy. And he was talking about his books and maps, and wow, I thought that was pretty cool. And I was just starting into astronomy at that point, and I've been hooked ever since. Been going, contributing more and more to the organization. I'm now out there, I was just out there for 4 hours today, working on the property, because there's always things to be done around the property on there. Anyway, we'll alert you to, we do have a public viewing event this Saturday, and I believe it starts at 9 or 9:30. Is 9:30 this weekend. Okay, so I hope to have some of you there, and we'll be getting the status on that will be posted on our webpage at grAAA.org or through our Facebook, and some other social media. So yes, the Saturday looks good, and then the next one will be on the June 1st. Okay. We'd love to have you as a volunteer to help us with the public nights, and there's always plenty of people to guides to help you out. So it's a good chance to, get to know some people. Oh, where's Don here? Don Ferris. Yeah, he's up here. He's a gentleman who's actually he's our new neighbor out at the GRAAA, and he's jumped in with both feet to help us, I think, almost at every public event that we've held since he became aware of the organization. So, relationships like that are precious, and we'd like to invite you to come join us. And we have a thing that we call the Starbecue. Well, that's just a fancy name for a potluck. But our next one is going to be June 22nd, and we hope to have the dedication of a new structure that we're going to be starting on next week, which is a roll-off observatory that we're going to be adding to our property. And we're calling it, this is going to be called the Strickwerda Facility in honor of Tom Strickwerda, who is our primary donor and a long-time member. And actually, he's done for a lot of work with some NASA projects as well. So he's somebody that we hope to be honoring at that event. So I hope that you can make it. And by the way, all of our events are posted on our event calendar on the website, on our website. And that's a good way to keep aware of what's going on. And, the orientation classes for the Veen Observatory, I think we've got one coming up on Saturday. Yes, I heard a couple people going to be at that. And we have, and again, our former program manager and former president, Dave DeBryan, is going to be the host for those training sessions. His email is on this website. Oh, okay. Well, so you'll be on the waiting list. Okay. Okay. And, we've had, at some time, it's something that we hope to freshen up is a blog of various group and individual activities called the Orbit. We have that on our website, and we hope to be making some contributions to that. Oh, yes. We hope to be converting some of our last meeting here was about eclipse stories, and we're going to be taking some of those and writing them out for the orbit. So, a matter of fact, I was speaking to someone, Dave, previous to this, that if you have some stories regarding, around the total eclipse, that we have a place for you to post those stories. So we'll have more on that. And again, Dave, is there any one person?
Have them, if they want to contribute to the blog that we're doing, have them mail a narrative of what they want to contribute.
Well, yeah, and they could just
Putting it all under one great big story.
Yeah.
Picture. But if you want your story mentioned, just send it to me.
Well, either send it to Dave, or you can also send it to the is it grAAA@grAAA.org, which is our web site email address, and it will be routed appropriately for that. So it would be great to have that. Anyway, what I'd like to do to get started with the presentation is to introduce the introducer. Yeah, that works out. Andrew, where is he? Is he available? Yep, there he is. So Andrew is a member, he's a member of the Grand Rapids Public Museum staff, and he is here to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May meeting of the Grand Rapids Amateur Astronomical Society. We are glad that you are able to join us here in the Meyer Theater at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. My name is Andrew, and I am one of the presenters at the Roger B. Chaffee Planetarium. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Dr. Uwe. Dr. Uwe received her PhD in astronomy from the University of Arizona in 1995. From there, she held a postdoctoral research fellow at the Astronomy Institute of the University of Cambridge until 1998, where she transitioned to the Space Telescope Science Institute as an Institute Fellow. In 1999, Dr. Uwe was honored with the Annie Jump Cannon Award, bestowed to an outstanding woman astronomer through the American Astronomical Society for their outstanding research contributions and promise for future research. After the turn of the millennium, she became an assistant astronomer at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. Dr. Uwe has been at the University of Michigan since 2004, where she helms the Feedback Activity in Nearby Galaxies, or FANG, research group. Their endeavors focus on various types of massive star feedback, radiative, kinetic, and chemical, into the interstellar and intergalactic medium on local, global, and cosmic scales. Dr. Uwe has also been elected to various advisory boards across a bounty of respected astronomical institutions, including the American Astronomical Society, the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, or AURA, and the Gemini Observatory. She is also the Arthur F. Thurnau Professor of Astronomy. This designation is granted to faculty whose commitment to and investment in undergraduate teaching has had a demonstrable impact on the intellectual development and lives of their students. I myself am fortunate to have been one of those students. In May of 2019, I had the privilege of joining Dr. Uwe along with 9 other students on a month-long course in ground-based observatories in southern Arizona, an experience that would come to be the highlight of my undergraduate career. Now, this sojourn involved the execution of research projects at the MDM Observatory on Kitt Peak, visits to various telescopes and observatories across the region, and, most pertinent to tonight's agenda, the necessity of dark sky preservation. Dr. Uwe has developed a passion for the importance of preserving the darkness of our skies, not only for research, but for the enrichment of all who find inspiration from looking skyward from an ideally dark location, as she herself has done countless times from mountaintop observatories. Dr. Uwe has noted that Michigan is one of the last places east of the Mississippi River that still contains areas with pristine skies, and that we must make a concerted effort to maintain these conditions. She is the founder and chairperson of Michigan Dark Skies, a coalition that promotes dark sky preservation in Southeast Michigan and beyond. After learning how multifaceted the problem of light pollution truly is, I was encouraged to join in Michigan Dark Skies activities, including one of my first real public speaking engagements at an Astronomy on Tap event in Ann Arbor. This exposure to scientific communication laid the groundwork for the skills that I have developed and utilized throughout my work at the planetarium and the museum. The legacy of Dr. Ui's education is evident in the content of my own planetarium shows, in which I am proud to propagate the message of dark sky preservation, and I am so thankful for her teaching. In tonight's presentation, Dark Skies, a resource essential to life as we know it, we will learn about the profound threat the loss of dark skies poses to environmental stability and societal health, and how to effectively combat the degradation of this precious resource. Now, without further ado, I give the floor to you, Dr. Ui.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that wonderful, very touching introduction. And you were one of my favorite students and my partner in crime. And I'm so grateful to you for everything that you've accomplished, too. It's really wonderful to reconnect. And thank you again to everyone here for the invitation. So I wanted to offer an opportunity to think about basically something that we all take for granted, which is day and night. Many of us here are astronomers, amateur or professional, and we think about the night sky, of course. But the night sky is not the only thing. That is one of the things that I've really learned the most about trying to learn more about dark skies. It's not just about seeing the stars. So as Andrew mentioned, I am the leader of a group called Michigan Dark Skies. It's a community organization at heart. And basically, we are a coalition of many different organizations, leadership from some of these environmental groups, from astronomy groups, from birding organizations, and so forth. And we all have these common interests in preserving the night. So the natural dark sky looks basically like what you see in this picture. A lot of stars, thousands of stars, and you can see the Milky Way and maybe a little glow from the last remnants of the sunset. This is the kind of dark sky that I grew up in upstate New York with that in my backyard. Many of you probably experienced the same kind of backyard night sky experience. But more and more nowadays, that is not the case. In fact, what is normal now for the vast majority of people is this for their dark sky. It's not dark anymore. This is the nighttime that 80% of people experience, and they don't have any idea what the Milky Way is. In fact, they can't even see that. When I ask students who are taking Astro 461, the course that Andrew mentioned, I ask them if they've seen the Milky Way, and only half of them raise their hands. These are astronomy majors that have not seen the Milky Way. All they have to do is drive out into the countryside and see it from Ann Arbor. It's not that far away. So that's telling us that we are losing our connection to the night sky. So a lot of the light that you see in this image here is beautiful, is necessary, but a lot of it is not, right? Some of it, a lot of it is excess light, and that means that it is pollution. Pollution, by definition, is something that is not needed, that is extra, that is basically something that serves no purpose. And so light pollution, unfortunately, is increasing exponentially. This is a study that's pretty old. It was completed in 2001, but they created the light pollution maps for the US in the late 50s. Well, this is in 1950, 1970, and 1997. And they created a projection for 2025. So it's not this bad yet. We're not going to hit this projection in 2025, thankfully. But you can see that we're well on track, that we are going to be getting there relatively soon. And in fact, it's increasing faster nowadays than what people had been projecting from a study like this. Last year, they suggested that light pollution is increasing at a rate of 10% per year, which means that it's going to be doubling in 7 years and quadrupling in 14 years. Here's a light pollution map for Michigan. And you can see, as Andrew mentioned, there are actually pristine areas in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, in northern Michigan. That's one big takeaway from this map. Another takeaway from this map is that when you look at the areas that are causing the most light pollution, we can see that the area that's affected is 10 times larger than the city that's actually causing that light pollution. So that means all of these surrounding communities are actually stakeholders in the lighting that's produced by any given municipality. So that's another thing to keep in mind when people are talking about lighting in cities and towns. All right, so why is this bad? Well, I mentioned it's not just about losing your access to the stars. You have an entire ecosystem that's out there at night. You've got animals that are used to living at night, the nocturnal world that we as humans don't really think about that much. So, of course, we think about owls, about bats, about fireflies, and so forth. There's so much more out there than just that. Then there's also the animals that are daytime animals that are supposed to be sleeping at night. So, if humans have trouble sleeping when it's all lit up, then the animals will also have trouble sleeping when it's all lit up. So these have ecological consequences. So the biologists call basically artificial light at night ALAN, artificial light at night. And basically this 24-hour cycle of night and day is something that all living creatures follow. And this, we call it the circadian rhythm. And if it gets disrupted, then it causes problems for all creatures. We don't really know a lot about how it affects, for example, human health. We don't know a lot about how it affects animals and their biology either. But more and more people are discovering that if it gets disrupted, it's not good for anybody. So the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded in 2017 for discoveries related to the circadian rhythm and human health. So ALAN basically disrupts the ecosystem. It affects birds, nocturnal pollinators, a lot of creatures that we care about. So let's think about birds. A lot of people are birders, and so maybe if you're a birder, you already know about this. The birding community has been very active in trying to combat light pollution. And that's because a lot of birds migrate at night, songbirds in particular. And building collisions are one of the top causes of bird death. When they're out there at night, they actually rely on the light sources that they see, the natural light sources like the stars and the moon, in order to be able to navigate and find their way. So when they see artificial lights, they get very confused. They end up being in places they're not supposed to be. They end up in cities and towns, and they collide with buildings, and so that's one of the top reasons why they die. And we believe that up to 1 billion birds a year are killed annually in North America by crashing into buildings, which is just a staggering number of birds. And in fact, if you think the number of species of birds have been declining, in fact, studies have confirmed that 25% of species have declined in the last 50 years, which is sobering indeed. Here you can see the bird kill from one building over one night in Ypsilanti a number of years ago. So how do birds actually navigate at night? So if you look carefully here, you can see the Big Dipper, right? The Big Dipper points to the North Star. That's how humans find where north is. Well, so how do we know that that's north? You can do a time-lapse photography, and you can see the skies actually turning around the North Pole, right? That's what defines north. North is where the Earth's rotational axis is pointing to. And birds actually know this. So birds navigate the same way humans do. They do it by celestial navigation. They see how the sky is turning. And experiments have shown, this is very famous, this has been known for decades, if you put birds in a planetarium like we have right down the hall here, and you make the sky rotate around a different point, the birds will think that's north. So that's actually been shown. This is how baby birds learn which way is north. So here's the time-lapse photograph. You can see it beautifully like this. So even baby birds actually learn which way north is. All right, so here is when we see it at night. And then here it is in a more light-polluted environment. And of course, you can't see the stars as well, right? You see fewer stars. It's harder to see the rotation of the sky. It's harder to see the North Star, too. So when we do this, it makes it more difficult for birds to be able to find north. Here's south. Birds are known to have more trouble navigating toward the south accurately. And we can kind of see why. The South Pole is below the horizon here, the axis of the Earth's rotation. So the birds need to minimize the circles, right? The circles of the stars going around, where their smallest circles are, that direction is south. So it's tougher for them to find that because there's no center that they're going towards. And you can also see that that point being below the horizon, it makes these artificial lights on the horizon more important, right? And that makes them confused because they're looking toward the horizon. Now let's make that light polluted, and you can see that the light pollution becomes even more prominent. These artificial sources are even more prone to attracting their attention. So this all causes navigational problems for birds. The more stars you have, the easier it would be to see the turning of the sky. So if you're in a sort of moderately light polluted area like Grand Rapids, you might see Orion looking like this, right? You see the main bright stars of the constellation. If you're in a natural sky, this is what Orion should look like. Tens of thousands of stars should be present. And you don't see that many stars. So those are the stars that we're taking away from birds and their ability to navigate. We're also taking them away from humans. So this is what we have lost from our view of the night sky. We're really starting to lose touch with the way that it looks normally. Another thing that birds can see is polarized light. Humans can't see polarized light naturally. So this is what the sky looks like if it's lit up by the moon. Well, it's one simulation of polarized light. So if you have polarized sunglasses, for example, if your car has polarized windshield, you're used to kind of seeing that sort of banding, right, when you look in different directions and the light's coming from different directions. Birds actually see that. So based on the position of a bright source in the sky, like the sun or the moon, they will see this banding on the sky, and that will help them to navigate. Now, if they're in a dark area, they would see the light from the moon doing this. If they are in a city, on the other hand, there's so many different bright lights from so many different directions that it messes up the polarization of the sky. It just causes chaos, and so it all just looks flat. This is a simulation of what that might look like. So birds can't use the polarization of the sky to navigate if they are in an urban environment. So they can't see the stars in the urban environment. They can't see the polarized sky in the urban environment. It's no wonder they kind of get lost and they end up just kind of wandering around in cities, trapped there, and crashing into buildings. Here in Michigan, we are in an area where the Great Lakes state. We are on what is called the bird migration, the Great Lakes Migration Flyaway, they call it. This is the Great Highway, one of the several great highways for migrations for birds. And so there is an awareness in the Great Lakes states around some of this. So there are safe passage, there's a safe passage program. And so many different cities have participated in these. Detroit, Toronto, Chicago have had some of these safe passage lights out programs. People need to be reminded over and over every single year to try to participate in these, but there have been some successful efforts. GM has even participated in this at times to turn off the lights during the bird migration season in the spring and the autumn. So this is just an example of a dead bird exhibit done by the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, for example. All right, so birds are not the only creature that's affected by light pollution and by artificial lights. We are now in a state that has been dubbed the insect apocalypse in the popular press. So one dramatic example of this was a grasshopper swarm that came to Las Vegas in 2019. This is a map of southern Nevada, and Las Vegas is located right here in the bright white point there. And this was a radar image taken around 8:30 p.m. local time, right around sunset, a little after that, and nothing particular is happening. 2 hours later, at 10:30 p.m., we see a big cloud there. This is a whole cloud of millions and millions of grasshoppers, and it's still there 2 hours after that. This is the graph showing you as time goes by, as on the x-axis here, that the number of grasshoppers has just, peaked during the middle of the night here. So all night long, there were these grasshoppers that were just dropping out of the sky all over the party goers in Las Vegas. It was horrible. And so this was not something that the people in Las Vegas wanted, nor was it something that the grasshoppers wanted. It was a disaster all around. It was a perfect example of how these insects were attracted by the lights of Las Vegas, and they got stuck there, and they just fell out of the sky due to exhaustion and whatever else, because they were trapped, because they couldn't navigate properly. Fireflies, of course, are another example of the creature we know is active at night. Just in my yard in Ann Arbor, it seems like there aren't as many fireflies anymore. I've learned that that's not just my imagination. There really are not as many fireflies anymore. And artificial light at night is said to be the number 2 out of 8 threats that the firefly scientists have identified. So for insects, the artificial lights affect their navigation, as we've talked about. It affects their mating rituals. Also the larvae, when insects are in their larval state, they are usually in some kind of hidden area. They're underneath the brush, underneath the leaves, or in the water someplace. When you have artificial lights shining everywhere, those larvae get exposed, and studies have shown that they get eaten up by their predators. So in fact, 40% of insect species are threatened or in dramatic decline. So the insect apocalypse is also real. Just when I'm driving from here to New York State, I'd never have to clean the windshield anymore. It used to be that you would have to stop every couple hours and clean the bugs off your windshield. It's not happening. And that's actually a pretty scary thing, because insects are the bottom of the food chain, right? So that means that the ecosystem is going to follow when the insects disappear. There are many other species that are affected as well. Sea turtles are a famous example. The baby sea turtles, when they hatch, are supposed to head toward the water due to the glinting of the waves, but they see the glinting of the city lights, head in the wrong direction, and then they die. There's also fish that are attracted to lights, bats, of course, even trees and plants. So if you have trees that drop their leaves in the fall, if you put too much light on them at night, actually they don't drop their leaves as quickly. It takes them longer to drop their leaves. And so that also stresses out the trees as well. They're not dropping leaves at the time they're supposed to. So if they're not doing what they're supposed to, then that stresses out the plants. So basically, there are issues for the entire ecosystem. So humans also are an animal, and we are used to having day and night, and we're supposed to sleep at night. Sleeping is the time when we rest our brains, right? And so when there's a lot of light trespass around and the sky is not the right brightness, it's not dark at night, that will disrupt your sleep patterns. And in particular, the production of melatonin, which is a very important hormone that tells you that it's sleepy time. Another issue for human health is also this disability glare, as it's called, when lighting is not appropriate and you just get really, really bright lights shining in your eyes. It makes it hard to see anything. So in that case, the light is not helping you. It's actually hindering your night vision. The American Medical Association has been weighing in on the effects of light pollution They're saying, in fact, that many species, including humans, need darkness to survive and to thrive. And the AMA, in fact, has written an entire comprehensive report about the problems to human health due to light pollution. They've, in fact, mentioned that the problems due to the melatonin production and the sleep disruption have created a whole host of different problems. For example, they've linked it to cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. And we can add to the list Alzheimer's disease now, too, that's associated with sleep deprivation. They have mentioned disability glare, as I just said. And they've also suggested that blue light is more harmful than red light. And we can talk about colors in a minute. So what about energy efficiency? We're working so hard these days to try to live more sustainably. Well, light is literally a form of energy. And so that means that any light that's wasted is literally wasted energy. So light pollution is a form of wasted energy. You look at all of this light that's coming up from off the ground, and it's not serving anybody. It looks pretty to people who are in airplanes, but it's not serving any useful function. Airline pilots do not need to see this in order to navigate. And it also starts competing with natural phenomena that we do want to see. We just talked about the fabulous northern lights, the aurora, and all of this light pollution makes it very hard to see the aurora. It's not usually as bright as what we saw last week. So this is a very busy infographic here. It was produced by Dark Sky International, which used to be called the International Dark Sky Association. It's the premier organization that advocates for dark skies and educates people about light pollution. And they have estimated that about 35% of the light that is produced at night is wasted. And that basically means that it corresponds to about 3 million cars worth of carbon emissions annually, which is a lot of wasted energy. There's an interesting phenomenon with respect to energy consumption called the Jevons paradox. This was discovered way back in 1865. So it turns out what the Jevons paradox says is that as the cost of energy goes down, the consumption of energy increases. So people do not save money, they just use up more energy. And you can see that phenomenon exactly with light in particular, and that's what I've plotted here. This is time, again, on the x-axis, where you have the year 1700 to the year 2000, and this is for lighting in the UK in particular. Let's see if I can get, I was hoping maybe I could use my, there we go. So this dotted line is the cost of energy, the cost of light in particular in the UK from the year 1700 all the way to the year 2000. And you can see that the cost of lighting drops precipitously by a factor of 10,000, as you can see. And then this other line is the consumption, how much light is being produced by people over the same period. And you can see that those two lines are exact reflections of each other. So people are not saving energy, they're just lighting things up more. This plot ended in the year 2000 because that's where the how much data we had. Now in the year 2024, we have LED lighting, which we know is even cheaper. It's way down here. And we certainly know that the use of lighting has exploded since then. So the Jevons paradox is alive and well. That means that really one of the only ways to get a handle, get control on excess lighting is really to do legislation, to have lighting ordinances, lighting codes for your towns and states and whatever. That's the quickest, most effective way to do something like that, to try to get light pollution under control. So how do we do that? Well, let's start looking at the details of light pollution itself. There's basically 3 types of light pollution. There's glare that we alluded to, very bright lights against a dark background that make it very difficult to see. There's light trespass, which is when you have lighting going into your neighbor's house, for example. You didn't mean to do that, you just didn't think about it. You want light not to be going into the neighbor's house. And then there's sky glow, when the sky is unnaturally bright. So one reason why we have so much light at night is because of safety concerns. And everybody needs to be able to feel safe at night. So this is very important. But the thing to keep in mind is that it needs to be effective, and more light is not necessarily safer. That's a very common misconception. There are a bunch of issues going on here. So over-illumination can cause deep shadows and can be not very effective, in fact. Glare, as we've talked about, can reduce visibility instead of enhance visibility. One's night vision can also be compromised if you are in a very bright environment and then have to go into a darker one. And then the so-called stage lighting, where you're illuminating something in particular, which may or may not actually enhance safety. So we can take a look at each of these examples here. So here we see either a college campus or an apartment complex or something, very common scene, right? Person standing right there on the walk, looks very brightly lit, looks safe, person feels safe, lots and lots of light. But this may actually not be an optimal lighting scene. Here I can show you the same scene once again, and the person is still in the picture, actually. Does everybody see where the person is located right now? The person is still in the picture. While you're looking for them, we can also point out that the lights are actually lighting up the trees here. So a lot of light is being wasted on the trees where the birds and squirrels are trying to sleep. And then you also have all these dark shadows everywhere. So it's not as effective at promoting safety and visibility as we initially might have thought. So have people found where the person is standing in the photo now? Before and after. Yep, the person's standing in the shadow right here. So before and after. So the creation of these really bright lights has made a person feel like there's great visibility and safety, and in fact, it's not as effective as we think it is. So your perception of safety is not necessarily what you think it is, and that's one other thing to keep in mind. Now, what about glare? Here we see unshielded lights. This looks like a porch light of some kind. And then if we add some shielding, presto, we can see much more clearly that there is someone actually standing in that doorway. Same thing with the scene down here. There's a bright light over here, it's unshielded, there's glare, there's perhaps a gateway there, and if we shield, we can see much more clearly. So glare really does affect your ability to see. A little shielding goes a long way. Now, what about this stage lighting? So let's say that this is a bank with an ATM, and a bicyclist or somebody comes up. It's so well lit, it's really bright, and the person feels really safe, takes out a lot of money. Well, if you look at this picture, you can see that there's some very dark areas in the perimeter of that area. And so it could be that there's some bad actors lurking in those shadows that are sitting there with binoculars and can now see exactly how much money has been taken out from there, right? Bicyclist bicycles off and is now completely blinded because they were in this very, very bright environment, making them even more vulnerable, right? So what does lighting actually do? It makes you feel safe, but could it actually also be making you more vulnerable? Lighting helps everybody. It helps the good guys and it helps the bad guys. And there have been some notable studies that have shown that, in fact, in some areas, if you increase the lighting, it actually increases the level of crime too, because that means criminals can do their thing. And then there's the business with the dark adaptation being compromised too. So when you leave a bright area, you go into a dark area, and then you can't see as well. Okay, let's talk about colors now. So LEDs are these wonderful new devices that are very, very energy efficient, which is fantastic. One thing with LEDs, though, is that they have a lot more blue wavelength light in them than red ones. So those very white, bright LED lights are the ones that have quite a lot of blue in them. And blue light is not as good for the ecosystem or for light pollution. Blue light tends to scatter much more strongly in general. So for example, the sky is blue. The sky is blue because blue light scatters more strongly, even though the sun is yellow. Blue light is also, therefore, more prone to cause disability glare because it scatters in your eye as well. Blue light destroys your night vision because blue is a more bioactive wavelength, which means that your body responds to blue light. This is why astronomers run around with little red flashlights instead of blue flashlights. And then blue is just not quite as natural for the ecosystem. And so we want to try to work more toward yellow or amber type of colors. In fact, the AMA, once again, has said that they estimate that the white LED lamps, those really white ones, which have a lot of blue in them, have 5 times greater impact on circadian sleep rhythms than conventional old-fashioned street lamps. So here for the astronomer geeks among you, we have the spectrum of an LED. So this is a spectrum with blue at this end, red at this end, yellow in the middle. So imagine your rainbow in the middle there, right? This is a spectrum. It's the colors of the rainbow going across. And this is brightness. So for the moon is this blue line over here. And you can see it's pretty much just a smooth peak that peaks somewhere in the yellow. And then this black line is the spectrum of an LED. And you can see it's got this big, huge spike right in the blue. So that's why these LEDs have this terrible blue contamination. It's because of that big blue spike that you see on the left side here. It's what makes them very white in their appearance. This particular LED has a color temperature of 4,000 degrees. So that's the way that we describe the color technically, is using this quantity called the color temperature. And so this value of 4,000 K is a value that looks very white in general. And that's the sort of default LED color. The manufacturers are getting a lot better now at making them look yellower. They try to tamp down this blue peak by putting a coating on top of the LEDs that absorbs this light. But it does tend to wear away with time. And so sometimes you'll see some of these lights that started out looking nice and yellow, and then they turn purple eventually. So this happens with street lights too. If you see any purple street lights, report them because they need to be fixed. And in fact, they may even have ultraviolet light coming out of them, which would be not good for your eyes. So let's keep this simple, not so technical. Let's just say you want to look at warm white, not cool white, right? So just get the warm white ones. You'll know when it's the right color, right? So if you do want numbers, amber is 2200 K. So those are now becoming more widely available. 2700 is good, that's nice and yellow. 3000 is about the maximum color temperature that you want in terms of going toward the blue direction, according to the Illuminating Engineering Society that sets the standards for what is good standard lighting. And you can find this information on the packaging for many LED lights. In addition, there are phone apps that can measure the color temperature for any light that you've already installed. Now, oftentimes people say, well, you can't use amber lights because they'll make everything look amber. Well, that's true for old-fashioned lights, but it's not true of LEDs. This is one great thing about LEDs. They have excellent color rendering, as it's called. So on the left, we see an old-fashioned high-pressure sodium lamp. These are the pinkish ones. They make everything look pinkish. On the right, we see the 2200 K LED, which is the same color as this pinkish one, supposedly, And what we see is that you can see the green grass is green and the blue is blue. So one wonderful thing about these LEDs is that they actually do have good color rendering. So it's not a good excuse to say that the amber light will make everything look amber. For an LED, it won't do that. So you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have energy savings and you can have good color rendering. So the great news is that solving the light pollution problem is easy. All we need to do is follow these 4 steps. We need to light only what is needed, no more than what is needed. We need to light only when we need to light, and light no bluer than needed. That's all we need to do. We just need smart lighting, not more lighting. This is not like a toxic waste dump that's very difficult and terrible to clean up and complicated. All you need to do is change your lighting and the problem's gone. So that's the great news. It's easy. So we can think about how much lighting we really need. Does a gas station really need to be lit up as bright as day, for example? So especially for gas stations, if you're driving along a highway at night and you come across this, then in fact, it's not a good idea to have it that bright, because when you leave the gas station, then your dark adaptation has been destroyed and you won't be able to see as well when you leave. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes for your eyes to fully recover your dark adaptation. So it's just a matter of being thoughtful about how much we really need. Light is wasted just like other quantities. Do we really need to take 5 napkins when we go to McDonald's, right? It's the same idea. We wouldn't leave the light faucet, the water faucet in the kitchen tap running all day long. Why would we do that? Why would we leave the lights on? Here are examples of shielded light fixtures. Shielding is one of the most effective things that we can do. We don't want light going at upward angles at all, to the extent possible. Sometimes it's necessary, but to the extent possible, let's try to keep lights looking more like this rather than like that. We can see on the left side an example where the building has unshielded lights producing glare, sending out a lot of light pollution. And on the right-hand side, we can see they've then changed those lights to shielded, fully shielded. And it looks so much nicer. You can actually see without hurting your eyes. It looks better too. It's more aesthetically pleasing. So here is sort of a graphic that shows you different degrees of how good or bad it is and how easy it is to see the sky. So you don't really want these oblique upward pointing angles either. This is kind of okay, right? This is consistent with dark sky practices according to the Illuminating Engineering Society. This is much better. This is really very bad because these upward oblique angles are almost as bad as sending light straight up. Why is that? Well, I mentioned before that light scatters against the sky, right? And that blue light scatters more than red light. And so again, so lambda is the wavelength to the -4 power. There's a very, very strong wavelength dependence here. And so blue light will scatter 10 times more than red light. Now, if you don't have plain air and you have fog, the water droplets are much larger. And so then it's no longer dependent on the color, but everything scatters so much more when you're in fog, as you know. So if it's a foggy night, you can see a whole dome of the sky basically turns as bright as day. You've all experienced that. So that's one reason why these oblique upward angles are almost as bad as going straight up. When it's going straight up, it's going straight up. When it's going outward at this oblique angle, it scatters so much more because it's going through a thicker layer of air. It's enhancing the probability that this light is coming right back down to Earth as light pollution. And so it does that, and it furthermore also spreads the footprint of the light pollution. Okay, so what we really want is good shielding, something that will produce this kind of lighting pattern. And all you have to do if you want to help with this effort is to do a Google search on light fixture, dark sky, because the lighting industry is very well aware of dark sky practices, and they would love to sell you any kind of lighting hood, lighting fixture, shielding that you desire. They have just a simple search. You can get any kind of price point, any kind of style, whatever you have. So there's plenty of options available. I do want to stress that fully shielding lights is very important. It's not sufficient to say, oh, well, here's a design that will only let 10% of the light out in upward directions. That's actually not good enough, because if you look at this chart, this is the brightness of the night sky on the right side in units of foot candles, but don't worry about that. So twilight has basically 1 foot candle. The full moon is 1% the brightness of twilight. Starlight is 1% the brightness of the full moon. So you're down by a factor of 10,000 going from twilight to stars. It's not enough to say you're going to cut down your lighting by 10%, right? You have to go down factors of hundreds, or in this case, 10,000 if you're going from twilight to starlight. So that's why you want to aim for 0 as much as possible. So basically, the solutions are to use full cutoff or fully shielded lighting, no light emitted above 90 degrees. This is 90 degrees, so, oops, let me do it this way. This is 90 degrees, and you don't want anything above 90 degrees. You can put your lights on timers, dimmers, motion sensors, so that it's only on when you need it. You can use warm white, not the very white, blue-rich lighting. You can have lighting ordinances, support lighting ordinances, promote them, and raise awareness. Again, we want smart lighting, not more lighting. And I mentioned the Illuminating Engineering Society. They actually set ANSI standards, standards of the American National Standards Institute. So there are actually industry standards for what are good lighting practices. It would be good to try to have building projects adhere to these. Not enough people are aware that they actually exist. You can also have lighting standards from the Federal Highway Administration and so forth, but pretty much everybody, including the FHWA, are consistent with the standards of the IES. I also mentioned that there's information on packaging for LED lights. This is set by the DOE. So they have a lighting facts program, which is sort of like nutrition facts. So you can look at this and it will tell you what your color temperature is. It will show you how amber your lights are or not, as well as other interesting, how much energy consumption you have and so forth. So you can look for this labeling. All right, so we do need outdoor lighting. So what do we want it to do instead of what do we not want it to do? Outdoor lighting should enhance visibility and safety. It should not impede it. It should contribute to a nightscape and not dominate it. And so ideally, you want any kind of environment to have a master plan. So this is a beautiful example of good lighting design. We see a plaza here. It looks mellow. It's got great visibility. And you can see that these lights are all fully shielded because we don't see the lamps that are lighting up this plaza. We're looking from above, and we don't see those lights at all. They must be at the tops of these lamp posts that you see here, but we don't actually see the bulbs themselves. They're fully shielded. This lighting of the stairway here is also downlighting from this banister, very cleverly executed. This fountain is enhancing the nightscape that we see. The perimeter is dark. There's not a lot of light trespass. So this is a beautiful example where there's clearly thought gone into the lighting design of this plaza. Here in Michigan, we have a fantastic heritage of dark skies. You all just saw the amazing aurora that was last week. Michigan is the best place in the world to see the aurora. On top of that, we have some of the beautiful dark skies that we have in northern Michigan. We can see the Milky Way. We have all of the scenery on the amazing backdrop of the Great Lakes. This here is the shore of Lake Superior from this fabulous astrophotographer. So why is Michigan the best place in the world to see the aurora? It's because we can actually see it in the summertime. The aurora comes in along the auroral oval, which is centered on the North Geomagnetic Pole. And that North Geomagnetic Pole is actually located in Canada. This is the North Geographic Pole, the actual rotation axis of the Earth. The geomagnetic pole is located on our side of the geographic pole, which means that the southernmost point of this ring comes in our direction. We are so lucky for this. Those places that are stereotypically where you see the aurora, Norway, Finland, Iceland, Alaska, those places, you can only see the aurora there in the winter because there's no nighttime in the summer, right, in those places. So here, we actually can see the aurora all year round. So there's a lot of aurora tourism here in Michigan. It's something we really should promote a lot more. There's a lot of aurora tourism. There's also astronomers here in Michigan. One of the biggest communities of amateur astronomers actually here in Michigan. And there's even an organization called the Great Lakes Association of Astronomy Clubs. I thought this was like a statewide thing, but I learned that actually this organization, the Grand Rapids AAA, is not a member of this, and you have 400 members yourself. So, you know, this is really, Michigan is one of the biggest communities of amateur astronomers in the nation. So the GLAAC puts on an event called Astronomy at the Beach that they put on in one of the metro parks in southeast Michigan. It's a huge event. They have hundreds of people coming with their families, and there's something for everyone. It's lots of fun. Michigan also is a place which has pioneered the whole movement of dark sky parks, believe it or not. So our own Department of Natural Resources here in the state of Michigan was the first entity really to start organizing dark sky parks. We have 6 dark sky preserves in Michigan. They're indicated in the black here that are DNR dark sky preserves. And in addition to that, we have 4 international dark sky parks that are designated by Dark Sky International, which I mentioned is the premier organization that advocates for dark skies. So those are really primo places. There's 4 of them here. Headlands, TK Lawless, Keweenaw, and most recently, Beaver Island. So Lake Hudson Metro Park, which is right down in southeast Michigan, the only one in southeast Michigan, in the heart of southeast Michigan, was the first dark sky reserve in the world. So that is something we really give our kudos to our own DNR. The Headlands is the first international dark sky park in Michigan. It was the 6th international dark sky park in the US, the 9th in the world. It's a county park up north in Emmett County. It's a prize-winning place. They were founded in 2011. Dr. TK Lawless is very recent, 2020, also a county park in Cass County. Keweenaw Dark Sky Park, 2022, the first dark sky park in the UP. A little surprising, but here again we see the aurora together with the Milky Way from this astrophotographer at Keweenaw, taken at Keweenaw Dark Sky Park. And brand new, fantastic news just last month, 2024, Beaver Island State Wildlife Research Area International Dark Sky Sanctuary. This is the first dark sky sanctuary in Michigan. And so a sanctuary is the highest level specified by the International Dark Sky Association, I should say Dark Sky International. And it's, I believe, 55 square miles. Again, DNR has been an important collaborator. They manage the vast majority of this area. So we really, really should be aware of what DNR is doing and to support them in doing this work. So huge for Michigan, a dark sky sanctuary on Beaver Island. Michiganders clearly care about this issue. If you Google on MLive, there are dozens and dozens of articles. There have been Senate resolutions by our state Senate, which means that they are bipartisan resolutions. We'd have proclamations by Governor Whitmer. This is something that actually has relatively high awareness. And so hopefully this is something that all of you might be interested in plugging into as well. You can help. You can share this information. You can update lighting at your own home and workplace. You can support dark sky friendly legislation in your town. You can support dark sky places. You can join Dark Sky International. There's also a chapter here in Michigan. And in fact, I believe the leader of that is here in Grand Rapids or nearby, darkskymichigan.org. And you can join our organization, Michigan Dark Skies. So I will leave it at that. And I hope you will join the movement. Thank you.